Today, we're going to be discussing online conduct. And so this training really looks at our interactions with people online, how we conduct ourselves, and what our responsibilities are, especially for you guys as a younger group of younger adults. What are your interactions kind of shaping up to be in the social media age, with everyone using multiple platforms and really working on increasing their visibility and enhancing their reach? We have to keep in mind that we want to make sure everything we're putting out there is positive in nature. So our mission at the Children's Advocacy Center of Collin County is to provide safety, healing, and justice to children victimized by abuse or neglect. We do that through our use of a multidisciplinary team. So we have 4 core services that we provide to all of our clients and families in the form of forensic interviews, therapeutic counseling for clients and their non-offending family members. Our family advocacy and support teams provides resources in the form of food, maybe assistance with utility bills, clothing, and things like immediate needs. And then we have our community education department, of which I am a part, that works to increase the knowledge and awareness of child abuse in Collin County, how to recognize it, how to report it, and prevent it long term. So when we think about online presence, we want to really look at how we conduct ourselves online. How are we responding to instances of hate speech, if we see them at all? What can we do if we witness or experience cyberbullying? And what are our avenues of just kind of protecting ourselves in our interactions with people online? So some of our learning objectives today will be to explore the nature of hate speech and whether it happens at your school, identify ways to be an ally to someone being bullied, discuss the importance of maintaining a code of conduct online. So every now and then I'll kind of open the floor to questions and just try to get you guys to chime in on your experience and share your own perspectives. So in looking at the definition of hate speech, we're defining it here as a verbal attack targeting someone because of a group that they belong to. Some examples might be race, gender, religion, ability, sexual orientation, and so on and so forth. So I'll open the question to the group. Have any of you experienced or seen hate speech online? Have you had any experiences with it in your schools, amongst friends to date? What are your thoughts on that? And feel free to unmute yourself. You can just kind of share your opinion, share what you're thinking.
You can write in the chat if you don't want to speak.
Feel free to jump in the chat as well. And then really quickly, Aisha, can I ask you to monitor the chat on your end as co-host? Since I have my screen up, I can't necessarily see it.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, so what is cyberbullying? Here we're defining it as the use of digital devices, sites, and apps for the purposes of intimidating, harming, or upsetting someone. So when we think about cyberbullying, we want to kind of consider how it differs from traditional bullying. What really, how are they set apart? And we know that cyberbullying is different from that traditional method in that it has a larger reach and a greater impact. So when children go to school, they aren't necessarily able to escape the effects of bullying when they come home. We're all plugged in, we're all members of some social networking site, we all are kind of managing multiple platforms. So when we think about cyberbullying, we know that not only are people unable to escape the effects of it, the impact is further reaching. So we know that what may start as a couple of comments on one platform can quickly expand to an unlimited number of people, and that can kind of lead to different forms of harassment. So we know that the effects are a bit different when it comes to cyberbullying. So what is an ally? An ally is someone who responds to a bullying situation by supporting the person being bullied. So for this group, I want us to kind of discuss how we identify an ally and who that person might be in our lives to date. Since we want to look at having a group of trusted friends and adults and that support system so that you know how to kind of navigate getting older and just responding to stress and crises throughout your lifetime, we want to consider who those allies might be early on. So again, I'll pose the question to the group. Who would you consider some of your allies, and how did you go about kind of selecting them as such? Are they your friends? Are they coaches? Are they mentors? What are you thinking?
I guess parents could be allies.
You said your parents? So why did you choose your parents as your allies? What is it about your relationship with your parents that makes you feel you can go to them first before your friends or anyone else?
Because parents can still support, if you're being bullied.
Okay, so your parents can support you when you're being bullied.
Depends on the way they react.
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit on that last part.
Oh, I said it depends on the way they react to it, but they can still like support you emotionally.
And that's a good point. So whenever I am in the community, I do tend to remind our parents about that communication aspect. Because when I'm speaking with different groups, what I find is that a lot of parents feel like they don't think their children would come to them if something serious was happening, if they were in a crisis. And I just like to remind them of the importance of that communication aspect, because as students get older, as our young adults kind of navigate tough situations throughout their lives, we want them to feel like they have a support system that no matter what's going on in their lives, no matter how crazy a situation is, they can always refer back to their parents for that support. So thank you for sharing. That's definitely a solid point.
Also, people are saying in chat that their best friends are their allies, or teachers or a mentor someone trusts can also be an ally.
Definitely. So teachers, mentors, anyone that you have those trusted relationships with can be considered an ally. And so something interesting that I have heard over the past couple of years is that some younger adults feel as though they don't really need an ally. They don't really need that support system because they're independent and they feel like they are equipped to handle whatever life throws at them on their own. And I support someone who feels like they're self-sufficient, but I also, again, would like to emphasize how crucial it is to have a support system, to have people in your corner, because life can get tricky and navigating all of those changes and the stresses can really have some different types of effects on our mental health and our overall well-being. So just keeping in mind that everyone needs allies, no matter how independent we are, no matter how well we think things are going, it's important to have people that are going to be there for you and be understanding. Okay. Let me see. We're gonna have a quick video. Let's see if it will play here.
We can't hear the video too well.
You said you can't hear the video? Let me try to mute myself and then let me know if the audio is still acting up.
I still can't really hear it.
You said you can't hear it?
Yeah.
Was it better the first time before I went mute, or was it just kind of faint?
The first time it was faint, but this time I can't really hear anything.
We might have to skip this one. Okay, so essentially the video was really looking at the story of Conrad Roy and Michelle Carter. Don't know if any of you all recall hearing about that case in, I want to say 2016, 2017, but we had two young adults that were friends. They met up on a trip, didn't really know each other too well, but they exchanged phone information and just kind of kept in contact over the course of a year. Throughout this relationship, there were a couple of issues. Conrad Roy was experiencing symptoms of depression and suicidal ideation, and he confessed to his friend, his new friend Michelle, that he wasn't sure what to do. He just knew that he didn't want to be here anymore and that he was seriously contemplating taking his own life. Um, During these texting conversations, Michelle tried to be supportive. She tried to act as an ally to him, but towards the end of that first year, them getting to know each other, she ended up encouraging him to kind of follow through. So after a period of time, their interactions were really based on just kind of getting Conrad to that point where he felt he could follow through with taking his own life. So a day came where he was in the process of doing so, and rather than call the police or notify his family members or anyone, Michelle encouraged Conrad to go ahead and commit suicide. He had some doubts in the heat of the moment and was thinking, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I need to get some help from somewhere. And she encouraged him to follow through. And so, unfortunately, after Conrad took his life, Michelle ended up in court. She was arrested and went to jail for a short period of time for her participation in the end of his life. So basically, there was more of a criminal component to what she did in egging him on and pushing him to follow through. So when we talk about an ally or the importance of establishing who allies in your life are, we want to really consider what our interactions with that person are going to look like. Is that someone that wants the best for us? Is that ally someone that's going to encourage us to do positive things, find positive outlets, and refer us to things that help us, that feed us and nurture us? It's really important that we have these questions in the back of our minds, especially considering how plugged in we are online, considering how many friends we make online nowadays. We want to ensure that the people we have closest to us, that we're communicating with frequently, have our best intentions at mind. Okay, so here we have a couple of different effects of cyberbullying. Common feelings that cyberbully teens may experience are powerlessness, humiliation, illness, and psychosomatic symptoms, meaning that sometimes what's going on outwardly can affect what's going on with us internally. So people that are cyberbullied might all of a sudden have constant stomach aches, unexplained headaches that they can't really figure out the cause for or really do anything to change. There is also anger, disinterest in life, social isolation, depression, and suicidal ideation. Minimize this. Okay, here we have Simone Biles. Some of you might be familiar. She is a renowned gymnast, one of the most decorated gymnasts ever currently. She participated in at least one or two of the most recent Olympics and received quite a few gold medals, but in one of the most recent Olympics, she faced a lot of criticism online for her appearance. And so what we saw was that Simone was really dealing with people that weren't championing her success or any of the great things that were going on in that moment. They were they were more focused on her outward appearance. And so rather than being at the Olympics, enjoying her success, and just kind of being able to live in that moment, she was more focused on her cyberbullying. And so I like to bring up Simone as an example of the fact that cyberbullying really does impact everyone. It's not just young adults, it's not just a certain type of person. Everyone really faces challenges in the form of cyberbullying today because we are all so plugged in. And it's important to recognize that just because someone has a different occupation, a different level of status, a different level of recognition in comparison to our own, that they aren't immune to the effects of cyberbullying. All right, here we have Pete Davidson. Some of you might be familiar. He was a comedian on Saturday Night Live, has been in a few movies to date, and is just, again, another well-recognized guy. But he has also experienced his own struggles with mental health issues that were related to cyberbullying following a public breakup. He was involved with a well-known pop star, Ariana Grande, for a little while, and a lot of the focus was on his appearance. People were just kind of comparing him to other public figures, and he was the butt of a lot of jokes. And as a comedian, you might think, well, I mean, what does it really matter? He makes jokes for a living. He probably jokes about other people's looks. So why would he ever really be affected by what's going on online or what the commentary is about him online? But again, we want to keep in mind that we don't really know what people are going through on the other side of the screen. So when it comes to our interactions, we want to ensure that everything we put out is positive. Not only is what we put on the internet permanent in that everyone can see it and it can be referred back to after the fact, but it's also important not to feel like just because you have a screen in front of you, that kind of removes your responsibility as a young adult to be cordial and to be respectful in your interactions with people online. So in looking at the prevalence and impact of cyberbullying today, we have a couple of statistics I'd like to show you. Oops, let me go back. A new poll released by UNICEF reports that 1 in 3 young people have been a victim of online bullying. Approximately 3 out of 4 young people said that social networks were the most common place for online bullying. And in a nationwide survey, 64% of teens stated that cyberbullying affected their ability to learn and feel safe at school. So what we know based on these statistics is that cyberbullying is not an isolated act, and that it really does follow our young adults and our teens from home to school, and that it impacts their quality of life outside of just their social interactions. It's felt in everything they do. And we also know that because about 3 out of 4 young people would say that social networks are the most common place for online bullying, that it's important that we kind of recognize what avenues we have in place for our response to it. So when we are in situations where we see this online bullying occurring, what are our responses? So what are you most likely to do if you see online bullying occurring? Does it matter what your relationship is to the person? So if you see a friend being bullied online, does that impact how you respond? Or do you respond at all? How do we kind of navigate what to do in these situations? Just keep that in mind. Then a few more statistics by the numbers. So 43% of teens have been victims of cyberbullying in the last year. About 50% of LGBTQ plus students experience online harassment, a rate that is higher than the average. 60% of young people have witnessed online bullying and most do not intervene. Only 1 in 10 teen victims will inform a parent or trusted adult of their abuse. So what this tells us is that there's a lot of cyberbullying going on, but there isn't a lot of action or response to it. So I'd like to open up the floor to the group now and just kind of ask, what is your response when you see online bullying? So how would you intervene, if at all?
Well, from like personal experiences, cyberbullying is really hard to deal with at times because you're not always sure if it's like meant to take in seriously how the person is getting affected by it.
Right.
So a lot of the times people stay quiet because they don't want to either get in and like have to back out because they just don't know enough of the situation. But for example, if a friend of mine was getting bullied over like a picture saying, "Oh, I don't know, you look bad," I would probably just tell my friend like it's just a random person. They don't need to know anything about you. They don't even know you, so it's fine. But if it's another person we knew personally, that's when I would personally step in, talk to the other person, and tell them, "Hey, that's not correct. You should apologize to them." But it all really matters on this situation, how good you know the person, and whether you yourself can actually do something about it.
Thank you. That was an excellent point. So context does matter. Sometimes depending on who is being bullied or maybe what we're seeing online, we might not feel moved to jump in. If it's someone we don't know, maybe we just scroll past some comment that was a bit disrespectful. But I would say that I applaud you for having the courage to kind of step in when you can, when you feel it's needed. And I think it's important that we recognize that we do have the power to do that, that it doesn't have to be kind of a full-blown altercation or interaction for us to just kind of step in and to remind people when their actions or their commentary is disrespectful that we're not accepting of it. And then I see in the chat, if you can do something about it, you'd advise the person to ignore that person and then notify an adult that could help. Another excellent response. So we do have options online. Most platforms have a block capability, so you can kind of remove that person from your profile, prevent them from even being able to comment and things like that. So again, looking at our avenues for response, we do have a couple of options available, and then having those allies and those trusted adults, having that list in place to kind of bring those people on board if a situation escalates is also another great option. Okay, and I see another comment. If it's not blackmailing or a personal attack, I think we should not take rude messages too seriously. Definitely. So if it's just someone that's kind of trolling online and you recognize that that's what it is, being able to move past it, block them, and use those types of options is another smart idea. So great responses here. Okay, now we're moving on to the next portion. So we'll look at sexting, kind of defining what that is and what the penalties in place are. So sexting in the state of Texas is a Class C misdemeanor, but what does that really mean? And who gets in trouble for what? So if you are a minor and you share photos of another minor that were sent to you, so let's say a friend maybe has nude photographs of someone else and they send them to you. That is a criminal act. So the transmission of those photographs, passing them along, is a criminal act, and you can be fined up to, I want to say, about $1,000, and you would be subject to certain community service requirements and classes. But when we look at the stats, I think it's important that we touch on the fact that not everyone is sexting, because we do kind of want to dispel the idea that that's normalized, that everyone is doing it. So we see that according to JAMA Pediatrics, about 1 in 7 teens have sent a sext and 1 in 4 teens have received one. So what that tells us is that not everyone is sending sex. It's not normalized behavior. Does it happen? Yes. Is it common for some people? I'm sure it is. But when it comes to the decisions you make as young adults, I think it's important that you are informed and that you're equipped with some of the consequences that come along with sexting. And those include even closer to home. So some of those academic penalties. Let's say you are sexting and a parent picks up that phone, or the person who sent the sext finds out that those images were forwarded somewhere and they weren't involved in that process, had no idea, and they go to the police. Now you're involved because you were participating and passing along that imagery. So maybe now you're looking at the loss of scholarships, the loss of participation in extracurricular activities, and then outside of school, your relationships with that person, and then also with the law. So what exactly goes on your record and how does that impact your life, even outside of academics, just for participating in sexting? So just being informed, being knowledgeable, and just making safe choices. Because when we engage in behavior like sexting, we don't know the end result. And so when it comes to interactions with our teens and our young adults, it's important to keep in mind that we always say what's on the internet is forever. And so what types of images you share with someone might not stay with that certain someone. If it's a romantic partner, in the heat of the moment, it might seem like a good idea, but you just have to keep in the back of your mind that if that relationship goes sour or if it goes south, what is that person going to do with your personal private images? We don't know. So we just want to make sure that we're making the safest, most informed decisions consistently. So in addressing sexting, we talked about a few of the sorry about that. We talked about a few of the consequences, but what are some important aspects of a healthy relationship? So what are some of the things that stand out to you in terms of developing a healthy relationship? And that can be with your friends and with your romantic partners. What are some of the things that you consider in those relationships? How do you define those boundaries? And then also to kind of piggyback off of that question, how do we develop responses to peer pressure? So it's easier to say no when we're not really being confronted with a close friend or a romantic partner, but in the heat of the moment, does that make you more likely to respond a certain way to that type of peer pressure? What types of refusal techniques have you come up with? And what do you feel comfortable saying no to? So coming back to that healthy relationship question, We want to have some established boundaries, even with our friends, on acceptable and unacceptable types of interactions and types of communications, so that they understand what your boundaries are, and they know that they probably shouldn't come to you with certain things. If you have a romantic partner that feels like they're obligated to certain things from you, even in terms of communication, they feel like they need to have access to you all day, every day. You have to respond to their texts within a certain time frame, or you have to text them all day, every day. Those are things that you want to consider, because those are going to be the boundaries that you establish to ensure that that is a healthy relationship for you and that you're being respected. All right, just a small case study here. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Amanda Todd story. Amanda Todd was a 15-year-old Canadian student and victim of cyberbullying who committed suicide in 2012. So Amanda was in, I want to say maybe 8th grade, when she befriended someone online. She thought it was just another teen from her school, didn't really think anything of it, continued to kind of talk with this person on Facebook, and eventually ended up sharing nude images of herself with this person online. Unfortunately, that person turned out to be an adult who then began harassing her. Amanda ended up having to change schools multiple times, because once that person shared shared her nude images with the school, she was then being bullied at school as well. So she's switching schools. She's just trying to find, a place where nobody knows anything about that past history, and the person is just kind of stalking her online. Every time she switches schools, they end up finding where she goes to school. They're stalking her social media, and this person would share her nude images at every new school. And so, unfortunately, the harassment got to be too much. The police weren't able to find who this stalker was in time, and Amanda unfortunately committed suicide because she just was unable to cope with the harassment and the cyberbullying everywhere. And I like to kind of use her story as a reminder, again, that when it comes to our interactions with people online, you don't necessarily know who you're talking to. So when we think about our boundaries and when we think about the red flags, it's really important to kind of follow your intuition. And so just because you have maybe a couple thousand followers online, you need to be mindful of what type of content you're sharing with them, because you don't know what people are going to do with that information. And again, just kind of ensuring that we're not oversharing and putting too much personal information online for people to be able to use and track us with. So what does responding to cyberbullying really look like? What are some of the options that we have available? One is talking in person. So we know that sometimes, and I think someone mentioned this a bit earlier, sometimes the meaning behind our words can get lost over text, social media, and other platforms. So face-to-face conversations can clear up miscommunication over comments that might have been intended to be funny, but were ultimately hurtful. We can block and report. So most apps and websites have a block or mute feature, to prevent unwanted communication. So if someone's just kind of spamming your posts or your platform, you know that you can simply block them in most cases or report that activity. And then telling a trusted adult. So coming back to that support network, those allies and those trusted adults you have in mind, identifying an adult that you feel comfortable sharing information with is good. And if a situation escalates, you can bring an adult on board that will help you and will be able to respond appropriately. What are some of the challenges to responding? Because we know it isn't always as simple as just kind of blocking and moving on, right? Depending on how and where someone is being cyberbullied. So one of the challenges might be retaliation. So if you intervene on someone else's behalf, or you try to communicate with the person doing the bullying, there can be the potential for retaliation. How do we respond if a situation becomes too much for us to handle? And then again, kind of revisiting that last option on the previous page, bringing an adult on board, and that can be, at this point, maybe parents, a mentor, or a coach to kind of assist us in that. And then responding constructively is really key here. As an ally, the last thing you want to do is engage in the same behavior as the bully. This can escalate the situation, and our goal is always to rise above bad behavior, not to engage in it. All right, so I will open the floor now. Did anyone have any questions or comments they had on any of the information shared, or techniques maybe they'd like to share with everyone here, and how they've dealt with things or how they would approach things? And I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Someone did say I've heard self-isolation and full independence is
The result of trauma.
I think that was in the chat. Okay, so I've heard self-isolation and full independence is a result of trauma. Okay. So I think that's a good point. Whenever people have dealt with trauma in their lives, sometimes it is common for them to kind of retreat and to feel like they don't have anyone that they can trust, that they can bring on board to help them, or even kind of trust as an ally, depending on what's happening. So that's another solid point. And I think that that's kind of been made even worse in this quarantine period, because we have, unfortunately, a lot of people that are at home that are kind of trapped with their own thoughts, right? So for you guys, that might look like outside of school, you're kind of limited in who you can interact with and the things that you can do. And for some people, that's extremely difficult. And that's before you add on the stresses of cyberbullying that some people have as well. So excellent point there. All right. There are no other questions. That concludes my presentation. Again, my name is Summer Thomas Mosby. I'm the community educator for Children's Advocacy Center of Collin County. We are a nonprofit, and all the trainings I provide are on recognizing, reporting, and preventing child abuse. So if you're looking for more resources, how to get involved, maybe some volunteer opportunities, you can visit our website at caccollincounty.org, or just feel free to call me or email me, and I can point you in the right direction.